right here.
Anytime.
Look,
If you want her, she's 13 weeks old. If you want her, you can have her.
Say it again.
Here she is.
She's
Isn't she
13
beautiful?
weeks old.
Cute.
Oh, that's my doggie.
She's
It looks
adorable.
like my
Is that a
side of the
Labrador?
family. I know.
No,
What is she?
poodle.
What is she?
She's-
What is her?
She's a 13-week-old standard.
Will you go
And
away?
She's a poodle?
Yeah.
Oh, watch out.
What's her name?
Go
Lucy
away.
Ricardo.
Lombardo?
Okay.
No, Lucy
Okay,
Ricardo.
we're gonna mute everybody
How old
now
is she?
since it's
Oh,
7:32.
What did you say her name is?
Lucy. Just a minute, I'll tell you. It's Lucy Ricardo.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's, you could have done Ethel Mertz. You really-
Yes.
That would have been really.
I
No.
could have, but she's a redhead, so
Well, but
Right.
standard poodles are stronger upstairs than Ethel Mertz.
yeah,
They're real negotiators, so
yeah,
you got a future ahead of you,
yeah.
but they're fun. Okay. So welcome all. I think I greeted everybody. Arlene Warchel, good to have you with us, and Steve Zimmerman.
Jim, can I ask a real quick question? Is there a
I had some
passcode?
comments
Do you
about
also have a
last week's
passcode for
Fisherman's
this?
Friends. If
No.
you'll let me go into it. I realized, yeah,
Do you happen to
said
have a
that, Steve?
passcode also for this? If my tablet asks for a passcode, is there one I could put in?
I don't think so.
Hannah, could you send it to
Yeah,
Steve Zimmerman? There is a passcode.
okay.
You shouldn't need it. Let me look at it. Hold on. I just looked at it.
Jim, am I a co-host here? Because I
by
can't
accident.
see people entering.
Yes, you should be. Hannah, will you make Fern a co-host?
Thank
Okay.
you.
The passcode, Steve, is, I'm going to read you the numbers. Imagine that.
Give me 1
456
second. Let me just write it. Sorry.
456
Yes,
285.
Here, put this in. first.
That should
Thank
get you in if you need it.
thank you.
Okay, so let's mute everybody. I want to talk about Fisherman's Friends because it took me unexpectedly that you all loved it so much, and that the conversation we had was just terrific, because we're talking about what makes a community and what are the things that build on a community that can't be bought. And it occurred to me, I don't even know if we came upon it at the end, but that in a way it's a good examination of identity. And no matter what kind of Jewish person you are, I urge you to look at the common history, the intimate relationships, the closeness, the sharing of the jobs in the community, the defense. Not that the Fishermen's Safety Group was IDF, but it's like, God, that felt familiar. We really believed in the legitimacy of their connection. And for those of us who are on the religiously skeptical side, it was kind of reaffirming to hear we saw this drama play out, full bore, true emotions with a lot of different people confirming that they had every right to be together and every right to feel more comfortable with each other than outsiders. So if anybody wants to comment on that, go ahead. If not, you can tell me that I'm just reaching. I don't have to prove the relevance of this group to the clergy of Wilshire Boulevard Temple. And if I did, I wouldn't take on the responsibility. They've been great. But I did get a comment from somebody last week via somebody else. And the comment was, oh, why do they show so many Alzheimer's movies? And I said, well, wait, we haven't really shown any yet. And it turns out the person had a name and they'd never participated in the group. So here's somebody who's reading my pitches for The Father and Still Alice and then Dick Johnson. And it's like they're judging without participating. And, it's okay because I can see that they don't want to waste the time watching an Alzheimer's movie. So let's get into this one, because is it an Alzheimer's movie or not?
Can I just, matter of business, there are a number of screens that say Jim Ruxin, and I don't know who's who to call on them.
That's Judy Pies, I know from the shadow on the lower left. Just joined.
Judy,
I know your shadow, Judy.
Judy, can you, okay, there's still another one that I can't identify.
Yeah, Hannah, maybe you could chime in and tell everybody how to change the name on their screen? If you're still there, Hannah? I don't know how to do that. Some people did.
If you click the three, if you go and put your
okay,
cursor
well-
on your own picture,
Sharon Isanaka is Steve Zimmerman.
if you go
I'll
to your,
rename.
put the cursor on your own picture, move up to the upper right-hand corner of the screen, click the three dots, and one of your choices will be rename.
So there's one person,
Okay, thank you, Steve.
a shofar that says Jim Ruxin, and I don't know who it is. Besides Roz, there's only one person on the screen besides Roz Weissman whose face I cannot see. If you would share your face for a moment. Yvette Reiner.
Which one is that? Isn't that Sharon?
No, the Reiners.
Sharon,
The Reiners. Okay, thank you.
Fern,
the Reiners, are they aboard?
Jim's name is right under
Yeah.
you where Barbara is. And then below Barbara is also Jim's name.
Yeah, yes, Jim's name is on Barbara's as well, because she must have gotten, Barbara,
But we know Barbara, we know
I know who
Judy.
she is.
We're
As long
trying to
as
identify.
know
Oh,
what
it's
to
Yvette
call you,
Reiner.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
now we know they changed their name. All right, let's get on with it. So I wanted to share my thoughts how the parallels between Jewish people feeling comfortable talking about each other as though it's a special group, and how these people, having lived there for generations, hundreds of years, are allowed to call themselves a special group. But you remember, they had an edge. When they're debating whether or not to trust Danny, the music producer, they say, well, our code is that we take a man at his word, so we got to give him the break. So it's not he's an outsider, we don't trust him yet. He says we should trust him, therefore we'll give him a chance to prove it. But it was just a very sweet movie, and that sweetness of community resonated with me. And I'm not, the biggest Jewish booster of all time, but it elevated that movie for me, because when we took it apart and we parsed the very small steps that it took for people to earn each other's trust, it really became something very special. So if anybody wants to chime in on that, please do so. I welcome all comments. You can tell me I'm
Susie, you
nuts
can
or
unmute
not.
yourself.
Okay, then we'll move on to this film.
No, Jim, Susie wanted to say something. Susie,
Okay.
unmute yourself.
Susie?
Okay. I think every phase of our lives, we have community. And I think that the values, for example, in elementary school, I had the brownies and the Girl Scouts. We were a community. We looked after each other. We had our meetings. We had all kinds of events and everything. I think that our synagogue, now it's a bigger community, but we always talk about community. I believe that the most important thing that you have to be a community is a common value. And I think their common value to make them a community, well, they had a couple of them. The major one I felt was the fishing and going out and fishing, and that was how they made their living. And then another common value I thought was the music.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
everybody was involved. Their wives were involved. Maybe their wives didn't go out on the ships, but they got up early. They were everybody has to be involved in what the issue is, what the value is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, let's, my first question for tonight, though, was, is this an Alzheimer's movie? Anybody want to take that on? Okay.
I will.
No shake.
I will start with
Okay, Judy.
Steve and then Judy.
Well, I don't think it was an Alzheimer's movie for many, many reasons. The first of which is, I don't think he had Alzheimer's ever. And while his wife did, and the daughter feared he might get there, it didn't seem to me he would. He had some mental problems, a lot of which.
Well, dementia. Okay,
Age
let's
people-
change the word to dementia.
Okay, but
It wasn't,
no, even that, I think he had a lot of old age problems, and I don't really think the movie was about that, except very tangentially. I think, and I didn't love the movie, but I think it was much more about celebrating life while you have it
right.
and enjoying the people you have. And it really didn't focus on the amount of his decline from beginning to end.
I agree. Anybody else want to
Yeah,
chime
Judy
in?
Pies?
Why did, I guess my question to everybody is, why did you watch it?
So I actually did think that he had Alzheimer's or a form of dementia. That may not have been the major theme of the movie, which was that he was dying of something. I'm not quite sure what. Why did I watch the movie? I kind of didn't. Of the 15, I watched it, but only partially. Of the 15 months that we've been meeting, I thought this was the worst film. I hated it. I hated it because, first of all, I thought it was incredibly inappropriate, especially the mock funeral. I was really offended by that. I was also bored a lot of the time. It struck me as being kind of infantile or partially like watching other people's home movies. And I'd be interested to see other people's opinion of it. But
So
I just basically multitasked and had it on in the background.
I'm not going to call on people to say if you liked or didn't like, because I don't think it's the best conversation for us to be having. Although, we could do a poll if people were interested
No,
at some point, and you will find very different, and we could do it at the end, but I think it's really, and it will become clear, but I think it's important to learn what we can from any movie. And I think that we get on a track that we may not want to do. So
Right.
if you can hold that comment as to like it, didn't like it to the end and just talk about the subject Jim raising, that'd be great. Steve Zimmerman wants to say something. Unmute yourself.
Okay, I for one thought it was a brilliant movie, and I did like it very much, and I did think it was about Alzheimer's. I think it was a discussion about acceptance and how to deal with it, and it's very philosophical. It was a little slow in parts. I think they could have cut out a little bit. It was a documentary, but it wasn't all documentary. It was also very creative. It's sort of a medley of documentary and very creative filmmaking, well beyond documentary. But there's no question that he had a form of Alzheimer's, maybe not as profound as some, because clearly he had a lot of self-reflective abilities and shrewd way of looking at the world. There's no question about that. That came through. But that's also about Alzheimer's too. It's a different take on different aspects of Alzheimer's and how it evolves over time. So that's my opinion.
Well, let's just call it going forward, diminishing capacity, and how he and his daughter did not talk around the issue of his death, which might come at any time. He had one heart attack earlier, and they even tricked us into a second heart attack at the end of the movie to jolt us. I want to go back to something Judy said about the funeral, and I understand why you might be offended, but there were over 100 people there, and they were thrilled with it. They didn't know. I take it back. They did know he wasn't dead yet. And this was the beauty of it, that the friend, you think the friend is totally genuine grieving at a death. Just imagining his best friend's death brought him to that kind of genuine catharsis. And the lady who talked about losing her husband and witnessing a suicide, for her, these people were not acting or lying. For them, it was as true as could be and as real as could be. And I lost a cousin recently, and while he was in hospice care, we had a Zoom meeting with him because his two sisters said, why should we wait till he's gone? He should hear all these things we're going to say about him.
But if he had been in the room, it would have been different. But he was like spying on it. If it had been a tribute to him in the room, it would have been very moving. But the way, I just thought it was.
No, but they knew. The
Was
point is,
in the room.
I'm playing
He
devil's
was.
advocate here, Judy.
He was in the
If-
coffin.
No, he wasn't in the coffin.
Well,
Then he was
that's
peeking
confusing. There
through
was a body in the coffin. I mean,
That's right.
it's a weird anomaly of the film. There's an overhead shot of his best friend speaking, and you see Dick Johnson in the coffin, and later you see him looking through the back doors with his daughter. I look past that. The point is, the people there knew he wasn't dead yet they were grieving for him as though he were. And it was a very positive kind of grieving. And so I understand why you might be offended at, but it wasn't a trick. This is what's really remarkable about it. The filmmakers playing with our own willing acceptance to the celebration of this guy's life.
We forgot a
Who's
couple
next?
of people who've had their
Yeah.
hands up for a while. Doris, Diane, and Susie.
Yeah, what I wanted is, I thought he was a lovely, sweet man. I really liked him a lot. And I thought he was just so
Yeah.
sweet and easy to get along with. And the fact that he agreed to this, boy, it took a lot of courage for him. I mean, I'm beginning to think, what if my son said to me, hey, Mom, let's make a movie about your being dead? I'm not sure how I'd feel about it. I'd probably think, well, are you trying to rush me to the grave or what? But he didn't feel that way. He felt like he was participating in something, maybe, I don't know if I could use the word fun, but interesting. And
Well, it certainly seemed like fun to him at times.
yeah, he was,
But, it's
when he
his
got
way of
smacked
saying
in the
goodbye
head
to
or
his
something.
daughter, too.
yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, to come up with that idea was so
Yeah.
far-fetched.
They're all funny. There's so many stunts. There are at least 7
It
different
was a little
stunts
bit odd,
there.
but anyway, it was an interesting film, and I
Who's
liked him so much. He made it worthwhile.
Doris, I agreed with you I thought that both he and his daughter were a lesson in how to be a human being. He was a
Right.
person who even when he was profoundly disappointed about not being able to drive, he just kind of worked his way through it and
Yeah.
accepted it. And when he did something that he felt he made a terrible mistake, his daughter was so generous in her response. Oh, Dad, you did X, another thing so great. And they just were really kind people.
Right.
I-
Well,
I-
They had a loving
remember, Fern, what they had been through together was the loss of his wife to Alzheimer's,
Right.
starting with the fall that she had.
But
And
this was
he-
a personality. This was a gentle
It's
thing.
who they absolutely who they were. But what touched me so much was when they said, history is turning back on itself, and we're reliving now what you went through as a child with your mother. Well, not a child; she wasn't a child.
Yeah.
But
Diane?
it's like they had this shared experience of losing somebody they both loved. So it's putting a mirror up to yourself, placing yourself in that story. Very brave to do.
Very. Diane.
I found myself focusing on his kindness to his grandchildren, his wonderful relationship with his daughter. That's where I really felt good about it. It made me feel like, wow, there's a nice person, kind person, good to his grandchildren. And that's where I chose to focus.
Mm-hmm.
Susie.
I want to point out, Diane, that just like in a drama, you found something you really liked about the person and you were with them the whole way through.
That's
The
where I wanted to
documentaries
go.
really aren't that different. Yeah, I mean, in that first scene in the barn with his grandchildren, they're swinging, and this, he grills like a psychiatrist. He grills the child. What did you like about it? He said it's like dying. And Dick Johnson has a laugh, and then he slips and falls. We don't know if it was intentional or not. And it's a joke on everybody who's there. He was just a delightful man, and he won us over, I think, from the first scene.
Susie and then Steve, did you want to speak? Yeah, so Susie and then Steve.
First thing I want to
And
say is,
Raz.
Jim, you are welcome to give whomever this person is my phone number, and I will straighten them out about the Alzheimer's movies, okay? And all the good
Okay,
movies we see.
we'll do that.
That's number one. Number two, this movie was for, in many ways, I think people who are very frightened of dying and what's going to happen and how is it going to happen, how are their friends going to react, all of that. It opens up so much of the unknown. And I want to share with you what the sense of humor that I helped my mother achieve. We called it going to the other side of life. My mother was so nervous. This is when she was 93, that she wasn't going to fit in the space of the grass at the Centinela at the cemetery, hillside. We would go to other funerals, we would walk around, we picked out her site, and the site she picked out, she said, I'm not gonna fit here. Look, and you know how they're really close together. And we had a sense of humor. I said, which one of us wants to lay down here and see how, you know, she, oh, I don't wanna lay down, I don't wanna lay down. I said, then I'm gonna lay down. And I laid down in the part of the area where her coffin was going to be. And we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. And she said, I am so relieved. You know, so I felt like my box was going to be side to side with the next person's box. And that's what they had. They had a sense of humor in so many situations in this film. And the mystique of a funeral, and whatever. I mean, I thank God bless Morley, he didn't get hysterical crying at my mother's funeral. I wouldn't have been able to handle that. But it was good. That's
Good.
it.
Glad you felt that way.
Steve?
Yeah, I'll just offer one other
Ross.
aspect. One other aspect of the movie that I thought was interesting was there's a discussion of friendship. And what is the meaning of friendship in this kind of context? You had 100 people in the congregation willing to go along with this, which was remarkable. I thought maybe something was up because I was crying periodically throughout this movie, including at the memorial service. And none of them were actually crying because I have a feeling they knew that he was watching in the back room. But the point is that they were willing to go this far to discuss a great person and what the value is of people's memory and how that constitutes a loss. Okay. And even though it was a brutal discussion, you're struck by the fact that Ray, who's his close friend who played the instrument at the end of the memorial service, I mean, he was reliving the entire experience and going through it again.
Pre-living.
Yeah, pre-living, and you know, and you really have to wonder a little bit, you know, how he was put through that for the sake of the friendship, but he did it. And I thought that was very remarkable.
Well, you know, psychiatrists will say that the purpose, one of the purposes is that therapy is trial action. You're sitting there, you're laying there with somebody whom you trust, and you try out, you know, what ifs, if I did this, if I did that, if I felt differently. And this was a trial death, both for Dick and his daughter, as well as for Ray, his friends. And it shows you the power of the imagination to go deep when we are with something, with some idea. And Ray took it, you know, to his very core. He's weeping on the side there at the end. And he knew Dick was still alive. So it's kind of what movies do to us as well, because they, like in Fisherman's Friend, that we build up these relationships with the characters and we trust them like they're real people. And they're just fictions inside our head, but they arouse real feelings in us. And if we run with them, we get the most we can out of the movie.
Roz, Raybo, and then Jay.
Oh, I was going to say, Jim, that the idea of him being uprooted and moved to the apartment in New York, I identified with the idea, and I thought how hard that would be for the daughter to have him living there, 1-bedroom apartment. I think he was sleeping in the living room, and to go from
she was. One of them was.
yeah, no, it showed him in bed, and I thought it was the living
But
room.
he said there was that scene, kind of weepy scene. Yeah, before he moves, he said, "Well, I do anything to be near you, and if this is what I have to do, I'll do it."
But
you know, priorities.
a drastic move to go from where he was to be able, and for her to be able to have him there too. That just touched me.
Well,
'Cause
those of us who've had to care for an aging parent, I think you do what you have to do. If it's reasonable that you can care for them and not suffer much yourself, you do. I did for my father for 18 months. And
Rather than put him in a facility. She brought him to New York.
no,
So
But I think,
right. Well,
Ron,
it's also her children there.
I think it was especially hard for him. You know, he had this big home he lived in for his whole life with his family. He loved it. He was independent, and he made it clear it was very painful.
Yeah.
But that the weighing of his entire life, and he weighed against his desire to be near his daughter, and he said it doesn't even come close. It was a
Right.
beautiful moment.
it was really
There were
very
many of those moments where he's saying goodbye to the house, to mom's ashes on the bureau, to the great spaces there. It's farewell to a part of his life. It's having the courage to move on to what is probably the best of all possible outcomes.
Jay?
Yeah, I thought the Faw funeral was manipulative. Funerals have become memorials to people's lives. They could have done that. They could have had a memorial to him while he was in the room. They could have said the same things about him and celebrated his life. They clearly knew that he was going to be going someplace, or they must have known he was going to be going to the east with his daughter. So I thought that was a little manipulative. And the other part of the movie that I found somewhat lacking, they didn't really tell us much about him, his past. They told us about the wife to a far greater degree than anybody else. But I was a little taken aback by the fact that they didn't attempt to explain who he was as a productive person or as a younger person. I would have liked to know more about it. He was really an interesting person.
Didn't they did make it clear he was a psychiatrist with a very nice office.
Right.
Yeah. Carol?
I actually thought the movie, I somewhat agree with Jay, but it was, there was a bit of Hollywood about that. But I think that the movie was such a tribute to the daughter and the father that I think that's really, for me, what carried the movie. I felt like I'm going to go buy the movie and give it to my 3 kids. But I also thought that it was as a reflection of what they lived through with his wife and her mother, and that was so difficult and trying that she was going to do it differently with her dad. I thought she was tough. I don't think I could do that. And I thought it was a major tribute to the relationship between child and father, who they obviously respect one another.
Yeah, there were several comments in the film when they showed the rare stock footage. She said, "My mother was so brilliant. This is all I have of her when she was frail." There were at least 2 segments of the home movies there.
Yeah.
And very often, again, they're saying, we went through this with mom, now we're going through it with you together. It is a testament to how tough they are. But again, it goes back to trial action. It's better to imagine it and go through it with somebody you're close to. It sort of destigmatizes it, and it takes all the unknown, much of the unknown out of it, so that you have the
I just wanted to have
and the courage to go forward.
Sorry, couple of comments. Jay, I don't think that a memorial to his life would have done the same thing, because it wasn't just a memorial to his life, it was about his death. And it was about as Jim put it, rehearsing for his death and feeling it and trying it on and the feelings about it. Carol just reminded me that in my family, at the last 5-6 years of my mother's life, when she was unable to drive, she used to like to play poker on Saturday nights with her friends. And she didn't want to take a taxi. She thought it looked tacky if her children wouldn't take her. So she wanted my husband and I to take her. And we drove her every Saturday night to her poker game from 6:30 to 10:30, and not 6:34, but 6:30 to 10:30. And because of the timing, we could never go to any movies, or do anything. So my husband and I used to go to piano bars all over town, and we'd sit and have a drink and have some appetizers, and then we'd go and pick her up. And at one point, my kids, this went on for many, many years, and my kids said, they were in their teens, said, "How long are you going to do that?" And I said, "As long as she wants to go play poker."
Right.
And I added, "Pay attention. This is a life lesson."
Right. We're modeling how to live and how to grieve for our own children. That's why I took my father in.
I
knew I
think
had
there's
to
an
do it.
expression that says, "In living we teach, and in dying we teach."
Mhm.
I think next would be Mona, and then Diane.
I was just gonna say,
Mona, lean in.
Okay, I disagree with the gentleman who said he found the funeral scene manipulative. The entire thing is a manipulation. The entire thing is a creative act that's highly manipulative. To me, that this was a movie about identity in the face of death, and the changes and the depth that the prospect of death in the near term brings to a relationship. I thought I was impressed that these characters were determined to live in the moment, to appreciate each other, and to achieve an understanding of each other that was so loving and generous. I thought many times the father looked quite nervous and upset and unhappy. He was not having such a good time at every moment during the making of this. I also thought whatever the nature of his dementia, other than the nightmares and the walking out of the apartment in the middle of the night, dressed, they were very covert about whatever other symptoms he had, and he actually was functioning amazingly well. I also disagree with the comment that we didn't learn about his practice. We learned about it indirectly from having all of the former patients and friends show up, from people being in the office setting in the chair with him, and you could see the way he talked to them and how he would draw people out. He was an extraordinarily modest, understated, gentle person. I thought very humble.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'm going to say, I know I've been talking too long, is that I was quite struck at how totally un-Jewish everything in this movie was. It was really interesting. It was like watching a foreign culture. I thought, my God, this psychiatrist is the least neurotic, least intense, the most psychiatrist I've ever seen.
Well, maybe there's something to Adventism, it's like that was a lot of scenes in the church and church friends, and it gave them a lot of peace. Like, remember, what's her name? The older woman he goes back to see, his high school sweetheart, Leonetta or something. And she's,
Lolita.
Lolita, right. Loaded name. And she says, well, I know I'm going to be all right. God will take care of me. And that's all. I don't need anything else. And maybe what we're seeing is this safe place they find when they give up their vulnerability like that, and they're allowed to just be free to enjoy the moment. So I'm not saying Zen-like, but somebody else might. It's just very interesting that community was particularly sensitive and outgoing and easy with their emotions, not hidden.
I didn't find them. I actually thought there was a certain flatness to their emotional range. I appreciated their gentleness and their kindness, but they seemed very flat to me.
Well,
You've
maybe.
been hanging out with too many Jewish people, Mona.
All right,
You're absolutely right, Susie.
all right, so Diane,
I'm never going to forget that, Susie.
Diane, and then Steve, and then the Steins.
I understand where I focused is not the main issue, but I did choose to focus on the relationship of the family. What's really important to me is that the daughter set such a wonderful example for her children, because I think the way she treated her dad with such kindness and care, her children were watching. They may not have said anything, but they were watching. And I think that kind of behavior travels through generations. And I think it does in mine. My children often say to me that I took care of my mom. And I know they're thinking, I know what they're thinking, and I appreciate that.
You know, I think it would have been interesting if we could see this movie through the eyes of a Seventh-day Adventist. I mean, I think that's a really underlying dynamic of their whole relationship, and the doctrine of that religious belief system of redemption and coming back. I think that's an important aspect that they didn't really flesh out.
They didn't flesh it out, and I would have liked for more as well. But remember, he took her to see Young Frankenstein and really enjoyed it just like she did.
It may have been excommunicated.
Well,
yeah, maybe.
But you know, that's kind of what I was going to mention.
Go ahead, Steve.
Was about, it wasn't clear to me whether they had basically left the church. I'm not sure. The way she was talking about it in the past tense and how they were raised and so forth. And then other things they'd gone on to do in their life and their entire worldview, actually, say, unlike Lolita.
Yeah.
It raised the question. It wasn't clear to me whether they had basically more or less said, all right, well, that was then and this is now, and we've moved beyond it.
She did say at one point that after her mother died, he went to church every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So
Saturday.
that doesn't mean he was still a religious believer.
Right.
Saturday, right. They're Adventists. But again, there's that community there where he was known and loved and welcomed, and he lost.
They also
his best
had
friend.
a black sense of humor. There's
very droll.
There's a macabre
yeah.
element here, and unless most Seventh-day Adventists are like that, I don't know, but it makes you wonder.
Well, but the lesson is don't look away. You know, it's better to stare death in the face and poke fun at it, stick your finger in its eye while you can, because there's nothing you can do about it. So that was a particular take on death that I found very refreshing, and it illustrated it very well. These people weren't comedians; they weren't trying to be. It's just this is who they were and how they lived. Joseph, welcome. Glad to see you. And we met Joseph this morning, I think, in Torah study. Did you see the movie, Joseph?
I did. I watched about 2/3 of it, and then I was preparing dinner. But what struck me was that, sorry for the squeaking. What struck me was that they kept doing these like dark comedy kind of moments where they're having him die in different ways. And I didn't understand if it was just to lighten the mood, but in some sort of ironic way that they're fine with the death, or what they were trying to achieve by doing that.
I think they did all of that. I think you nailed it. They were trying to lighten the mood. They were also showing different ways of accepting the tropes, the common ways that death is expressed in our cultures, and sort of making fun of it all. You know, that it's not all serious, and that why be serious when you don't have to be? You're not going to be around to regret it. So those sequences, the stunt deaths, as well as those big scenes where he falls into clouds and he's dancing with his dead wife, and these are like dream sequences that sort of both express our willingness to believe or our wishing for another way, but also punctures the belief that everything's going to be okay, because some of them are ridiculous, you know. And it's part of the brilliance of the movie. It's not just a cinema verite film where it's a raw documentary and this is how it came out of the camera. And, you know, it's so much more than that, because they use those to illuminate the relationship and the attitudes towards death that these people were living out. It's just a more fun way of doing it.
I think that it's also, I mean, life and death are bizarre. We live just to die. You know, life, if in certain ways of looking at it, is very bizarre. The fact that we will all die, and we pretend as if not, as if we'll be here forever. And it's very bizarre. And presenting, you can cry about it. You can cry about the fact that you're going to die, or you can just say, I guess I'm going to die, and I'm here now, and I'm going to make fun of it while I can. And so I think a lot of that was in the sketches that they did, the phantasmagoric sketches. I know the Steins have been wanting to talk for a while, and then Mona and Steve, and then Susie.
What struck me about the movie was that the bond between the father and the daughter was so therapeutic. In order to get him to move from Seattle, to move in with her, there was a bond. They were working on something. They weren't just waiting for him to die. They were working, they were building something, they were creating something. And in that creativity was the bond that was going on between them, which was really giving, I mean, he was a psychiatrist. So he fell for, or went for, the therapeutic nature of how they were going to deal with his death. Also, what I thought interesting is in those little dream sequences, there was singing and dancing. And I thought the Seventh-day Adventists didn't do any of those things. So I was wondering how in the dream world, we're going to sing and dance and have fun and drink, none of which we can do in real life unless they were excommunicated.
Or the daughter.
I had a question too. I didn't know who took care of the mother during her Alzheimer's problem, because the daughter was in New York, and I wondered whether the father had the burden of taking care of the mother.
She was in a home.
They finally put her in a home.
Yeah,
but there was a son. There was a son, I think her brother. There was a foreshot of them at the end of the funeral service, and he had a wife, and they very likely, were helpful with the mother before she was put in the institution.
So is it possible that the daughter had the guilt that she didn't want this to happen?
Oh, clearly.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
She learned the first time how tragic it was, and I think she referred to that indirectly, that she knew so much more now than she did 7 years before or more with her mother. And the idea clearly for the movie came to her, came from her. And, so it's her way of working through this. How am I going to deal with losing this man?
Before you go, let me call on a couple of people that haven't spoken. I'll get back to you. Barbara and Alkov.
Michael, right? So Barbara first.
Yeah. The word that comes to my mind a lot is courage. I think it was a courageous movie because it sort of denied the way we usually deal with things, and it pierced our usual behavior about death. And I thought the father was courageous and the daughter was courageous, and the courage came from the health of the relationship. I don't think that courage could happen unless the relationship was solid and safe. Solid. And it was already worked out. And out of that worked out relationship came that ability to sort of face death. And I think the Seventh-day Adventist part was just fascinating because death is probably less frightening. I think it's a culture that we don't understand. But there was a lot of courage in the movie, I thought. Courage to look at society differently. And I thought it came out of the health of the relationship.
Michael, you want to unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, the very first person that spoke made the comment how much they disliked it. And they said that at the conclusion of this discussion, a poll would be taken. And I'd be interested to see the results because I agreed with the person very strongly that that both of us disliked the movie.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the end.
Oh, okay.
Although it may be pretty clear, it may be at the end of the conversation how it is, but absolutely.
Okay, but I want to say
Mona?
one thing to Michael about that. I don't blame you for wondering, but part of what we do here is to sort of mingle our conflicting views and perhaps learn a little bit more about the film by taking apart what somebody else saw in it that we didn't. So it's you know it's just one of the things we do, and it's I found to be particularly helpful because I've learned plenty. I've seen things in new ways I didn't imagine possible, and other people have opened up the film for me. So that happens often, and that's why there's no wrong views here. We don't consider it that. But
I'm
sure.
the one that said that, Michael, and I am learning a whole lot from other people's comments, things that I did not see.
I think that that's true. Sometimes when you read a book, if you have a book club,
Yeah, sure.
some of the best conversations may come out of books that you just simply did not like at all. And other people feed you information you didn't, or thoughts you didn't have. Mona, I'll get to you.
I was just going to say that I thought while the father and daughter had a very strong relationship, I think the daughter had considerable difficulty accepting that she was going to lose him. And I felt that the documentary, in a way, was her method of preparing herself for this inevitable, tremendous loss.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
doing it in a way that would involve him and show him how the kind of work she did in a very intimate, deep way. He would be going to work with her, and he would be learning about what she did from the inside out. And I think he also viewed this as an opportunity to see her at work. I also had the impression that the unspoken backstory was that she was closer to her father than she had been to her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she was experiencing some regrets about the process, that the way the mother had been handled towards the end of her life. And she wanted to do this a different way. And I completely agree with Diane's comments about this being a model for the younger generation. She was modeling behavior. And in fact, when I brought my mother to live in a board and care near us towards the end of her life, she had dementia and Parkinson's disease. And I was talking to Morley about it. Thais was in high school at the time. And he said, oh, this will be an excellent thing to show your daughter. Steve hated it, but I liked it, but I wasn't thrilled. There was something there was something that didn't work for me, and maybe it was just cultural.
I'm sorry, maybe it was what?
Cultural.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, there was this kind of to me, what seemed like a flat affect. Oh, I wanted to mention, someone said, well, maybe everybody in the congregation has this mordant sense of humor. I completely disagree with that. She was obviously very unusual. She must have left the church doing the kind of work that she was doing. So I think part of their special bond was participating in this somewhat outrageous activity at the end of his life. And I think he got a kick out of it, even though at times I think it caused him considerable stress.
I was just thinking that when my mom was dying, she needed to be taken to the doctor a whole bunch of times and a lot. I'm an only child, and I was taking her, and I was freaking out because I was taking her to the doctor and I had to do work and I couldn't balance it. And she said to me, she was a very straightforward person, and she said to me, I've got one child. You need to take me to the doctor. That's what you need to do. You just do the right thing. And then when I die, you don't have to waste 1 minute worrying about whether you were a good daughter or not. You're a good daughter. just do what you need to do, and you can put it aside. And it feels like that there are lessons to be taught to our children and to younger people about how we let people die, how we help people die, and how we ourselves can get through their dying by behaving in certain ways. And I think this film was one of those lessons.
Thanks for that, Fern. I want to share my story about my father. He was never a very talkative man, and he'd been with us for about 16 months. And I was going away to Africa for a shoot for 7 weeks. And I sat down in his room next to him with a chair. And I said, Dad, you know, you're stable, but you are terminally ill. Is there anything you want to talk about? Are you afraid? Are you scared? You know, do you want to talk about it now? And he kind of smirked at me and he said, well, I'm not going to let it worry me to death. Right. It's funny. And I realized I probably knew him better in that moment than I had my whole life, because that's how he wanted it. He was never a guy who really faced stuff, and he wasn't very eloquent, and he's a decent man, but it was like too much for him to deal with, so he didn't. And, you know, I tell the story as an example of what the golden rule really is. It's not what I would have wanted in my last moments with my son. You know, it was what he wanted. And sometimes what's best for other people is what they want for themselves, not what you think is best for them. It was a huge part of that learning experience. And they're all different, you know. We learn about this passage of life from many different people.
Barbara, did you want to say something?
I think that what the issue has come up a lot is about how we want to teach our children. And I think a lot of our behavior in many ways is about that. I didn't have a good relationship with my mother. And when she was dying, I was there taking care of her. And I did it for my own personal growth and soul. But I also did it to make clear to my children about reciprocity and the circle of life and what happens. And I think a lot of us are feeling that this film was about how the lessons are taught. And it's not just what you say, but it's what you do. And
right.
it was powerful on that level. My Kishkis, even though they were Seventh-day Adventists, my Kishkis really felt it, really deeply felt it. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience between those two human beings, and about how you behave.
Jim, I wanted to just respond to what you were saying about people dying on their own terms, not how we do. That when my dad was dying, it was very clear he was dying, but he didn't want to talk about it. But I was 27 and I wanted him to talk about it and give me life lessons. And so I would say to him, Dad, do you want to know anything? And he'd ask me a lot of questions, but he didn't ask if he was dying. And then I said, well, you want to know anything more? And I kept trying to get there and he didn't. And I felt very disappointed because I thought he had lived a spectacular life, but he wasn't dying the way I wanted him to. But people die on their own terms. And you don't get to, she was lucky. She was able in some ways to manipulate it to be the way she wanted it to be. He was willing to go along with it, but not everybody is. Would you like to say something, Judy?
No, I was actually trying to fix my name so it doesn't say Jim Ruxin.
Oh, I know who you are.
We know who you are.
No, I know. I don't know why that happened.
Because you're using.
You used a link that was my personal link.
I see. Okay.
Susie. And then Roy.
It's very interesting when you read about what the critics say about this movie. I thought that they would be really anti and kind of have not wonderful things to say. But the critics on the internet were so positive. And I don't want to let something go by, we haven't mentioned it yet, that in the 3 reviews I read of the movie, the stuntmen who did all those stunts were definitely deserving of a lot of recognition. Now, I don't know how much she had to do with it, the the daughter, whether she individually selected the stuntmen or how she chose what kind of stunts she wanted, like, you know, bumping into the board, having the box fall down at the beginning of the movie. But I thought that they contributed a lot to the movie. They were surprising. They came at very surprising times, and so they seemed so real, especially the first one. I thought, oh my God, is he going to die in the first frame of the movie? And you know, of course, then it went on. Then I want to say one other thing. Am I the only one that's curious about this chocolate cake that just kept I mean, yes, we knew he loved chocolate cake, but I counted 4 cakes in the film. Does it have any
Chocolate ice cream.
symbolism or anything? I mean, and the last cake, the way the kid cut it, the last cake, it looked like sometimes when I take my dog out to go to the bathroom, it really looked horrible.
But you see, that's a testament to his love for his grandchildren. He just had a ball with that. And the cake was just fine. I mean, that's
He liked red wine too. He drank a big glass of
He
red
drank
wine
red
with every
wine.
meal.
He really did. He was and then we're using the word was. I am. He was a charmer, because at the end it gave the date of his birth, but the end of his life wasn't dated. Do you think he's still alive?
Well, the film was finished in 19 or 20, so I don't know.
Well, this is 21. Maybe.
Right, but
You
see,
missed a
that's
whole year.
the point.
You're
Is
supposed to know.
they're showing us how to
Jim,
live.
you know
somebody,
No, we're not.
somebody
It doesn't
I know-
matter.
Yeah, somebody
You can
I know
believe in a
checked
fairy
that
tale.
he was put into a home in dementia and that he's doing fine.
He's still alive.
He's still,
We
Dick
think.
did not die.
Dick
Okay,
did die.
thank you.
Roy, you want to unmute yourself and speak?
Sure. Just express my opinion. I enjoyed the film, and I enjoyed it on several levels. One is a filmmaker taking a subject that could be depressing and making it interesting and not morbid, but also observing an individual dealing with a challenging situation, and that the advancing mortality of her father, and having gone through this recently myself several times, I know how delicate it can be, and I'm glad she shared it. But I sort of bring this up as much to hear Jim's comment on this is a genre, the documentary genre, yet she introduced other elements, fantasies, and I thought I was watching something by Buñuel a little bit sometimes, but talk about the genre, the documentary genre, and and how she may have bent it a little bit to convey some. I think she was able to say things doing her technique rather than just a straightforward narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Documentary has changed remarkably in the last 20 years with the advent of digital filmmaking. The cameras are cheaper and lighter. Crews are getting more experience shooting off the shoulder. They can move quicker. They can shoot in lower light, in harder locations. They're no longer just, subject to shooting an interview subject with a camera on the tripod and not going anywhere. And she really ran with that liberation, both cost-wise and creatively. And, if you think about, as I said in the beginning, documentaries are just like dramatic feature films. You have to believe in some character. You have to believe that you know them. Whether you like them or hate them doesn't matter as much as you really feel you understand their motivation and their action, the reasons for doing things, even if you disapprove. But that's a kind of knowledge as well. And she used these things to strengthen what they were saying. So she's just using the available tools that documentarians can now afford. And frankly, if you look at the films of Alex Gibney, who's probably our foremost documentary filmmaker today, does a lot of films for HBO. He did the Scientology documentary. He did 0 Days about the Stuxnet virus that ended up being a documentary on cyber warfare about 5 years ago. Documentary filmmakers, they are just as creative as screenwriters of dramatic features. They have imaginations, they're visualists, some of them. This is certainly within the bounds. It's sort of a demand now of documentary filmmakers. Maybe some of you can remember what I thought was kind of a dreadful movie called Super Size Me, where some guy ate nothing but McDonald's hamburgers for 30 days, and followed the decline of his own health, and got to the Miramax, the Harvey Weinstein company. And he wanted to distribute it, but he said, okay, we're going to remake this. And he put like $200,000 into a film that maybe cost only that much to make, and shot all these animated sequences to make it more current and more hip and more fun and playful. And sure enough, it made a lot of money for a documentary. Probably grossed 30 million or more. I don't know what the exact number is, but many millions more. It was a big profit maker. And it put Morgan Spurlock on the map as a filmmaker. And he did a television show, working man's television show about jobs. It's like the audience likes this kind of, these touches to documentaries, and it helps them get seen. And in this case, I think it helped it play. It made her points very well. And it followed through on her relationship with him, the kind of ridiculing of fairy tale heaven scenes, the clouds and the dancing. And it was just wonderful. It's actually, the filmmaker is taking a seat alongside of us as guests, as observers, and saying, isn't this funny? Not patting themselves on the back so much, but isn't it cool to make fun of our notion of heaven or hell? And so the filmmaker he's sharing with us that she knows what we're thinking. So there's an intimacy that comes from that breaking the fourth wall, as they say, where the filmmaker acknowledges this is an artifice, it's out of the general scene that we're doing, but it's about the same subject. So it reaches us on a higher intellectual level. And I hope that explains it to you, but it's very common now. And this was one of the more skillful, fun applications of these added creative scenes to a documentary. Is that sufficient for now?
Perfect.
Okay. I mean, if anybody else had any issues with those scenes, and we can talk about that. We have some time left.
If we have we have a little bit of time. I don't know if you have any further comments, or you'd like to just have a straw. Yeah.
Well, let's do our vote. Well, yeah, further comments and
Let
then
me
the
get
vote.
comments, and then we'll get our little straw vote. Jay.
Yeah, I just want to second Jim's comment. I thought what people refer to as fantasy, that was her depiction of heaven. It's consistent with the Christian doctrine that these people believed and followed. And she was showing him, this is what heaven's going to be like for you.
I think it was a little more critical than that. I think that together they were having fun playing with the idea. I mean, she wasn't ridiculing any Adventist beliefs he might have, but what they were saying is what we have is here on earth. And, it's conjecture, so let's have some fun with what heaven might be like.
Have you seen the movie, Jim, called, not the movie, the TV show with Ted Danson called The Good Place?
I haven't. I haven't seen it.
It's a spoof, but it's about somebody who winds up in this heaven, and it's very clever. It would be an interesting comparison of views of heaven. It's quite hilarious, actually, and profound sometimes.
Jim, my understanding of what they think about death is much more similar to a Jewish view than most Christian views, that they kind of die and at some point in the future are all resurrected together.
So there's
they had a discussion of that in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's dependent on the second coming and whether you accept Jesus as your personal savior.
Right.
Right.
So that's basically your basic Christianity.
No, because most basic Christianity, you go to heaven before the second coming.
If you've lived a good life,
Okay, well, yeah.
As opposed to here with them, they don't go to heaven. They're just
Okay.
there until they're resurrected at the second coming.
Until Jesus comes back.
Any other comments before we dive into the straw poll?
Think we're
Do we
good.
want to do this anonymously, or we just want to raise hands?
Raise
Vern,
hand.
you decide.
Oh, I think you have to have courage. Barbara said that it's about courage. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's all have some
Raise
courage.
hand.
Stand up
So
here.
how many,
I don't know, I'm a little embarrassed without a secret ballot, Jim.
just,
you know
have
what?
a secret ballot, Steve. I won't tell anyone.
I think we know where it's going to land. You were outed already, but you two get to raise two hands. You know,
All right. Why
and
don't we
Carol
do
and
it
Jay,
more
you get two
simply?
hands, not one.
Those who after the discussion think it was not a valuable experience, raise your hand.
Oh, that's a loaded question.
That's
No,
not the
that's not a
question.
good.
Not a valuable experience, Joanne. She's
Poorly worded question.
Poorly worded
Well,
question.
okay, you can ask it anywhere you want.
The question's whether we like the movie.
How many would have gone to see the movie without Jim thinking?
You have already.
I've never heard of it until Jim, so I
Like it. Why don't,
How many people like?
Who liked it and who didn't? Let's put it that way.
How many liked the movie? 1, 2,
Ooh, Arlene and Arthur have something to fight about tonight.
7, 8, 9. 9. And how
Joseph, you
many?
get 3/4 of a vote.
10. How many did not?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
8, 9. About
Wow.
even.
Okay, so should I not program stuff like this in the future? That's why I wanted to know.
Define
Hey,
like this.
Yeah, no
Jim, I
program.
can't
Hell no.
Tell me
Hell
what you
no.
mean by like this.
I won't come.
Wait, say stuff like this. What do you mean? Define stuff like
Well,
Jim, the fact
I knew about this film and I hadn't seen it until a month ago, and I saw it and I said, "Oh wow, I really enjoyed that. I think we have to show this." But I sort of put it aside because it's a bit edgy and droll and black. And then a couple of weeks ago, people started saying, "Could we have more upbeat films?" And I thought, well, some people will have some fun with this.
Jim's
So,
idea of upbeat is a movie about dying.
Yeah, this was not
a
upbeat.
good way.
But in a good way. We gotta talk, Jim.
Hey.
The next movie will be The Wrong Box.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
You
Joe
know what?
wanted to say, hold on for a second. Susie, hold on, please. Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. I could tell from the get-go that this did not have a particularly Jewish background to it because there was no discussion of corned beef, pastrami, and whitefish.
Well, they were in the wrong heaven.
And Ross says chocolate cake. They have to all be planned out meticulously for the post-funeral party. So,
It's true.
you've got the whitefish salad.
Yeah, but
There was-
thanks.
but with Costco and whitefish salad, you can always be prepared.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Susie, did you want to add something?
I do. The discussion was outstanding tonight. And if everybody liked something, then everybody's saying the same thing over and over again. I have no problem with not liking a movie and saying it when we have our discussion. I don't think you pick movies that you know everybody's gonna like. I mean, we have to have some yeses and nos.
Right. It's not a matter of liking it. When I think of things for us to discuss, it's going to be what's going to produce a good discussion. Who will get something out of the film? What will it bring out in us? And to me, this was a little more fun and engaging than, some Holocaust movie. We'll see plenty of those coming up.
I had one final comment. It seemed to me that considering the availability of technology today, maybe this is the opening ploy of people sitting down with their family and doing a video of their lives before they die.
Yes, that's very much the rage now. And the internet has helped that. It's like a pre-death tribute. Because who else? You don't know who else is going to go.
Frank, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Jim, I would welcome your continued experimentation and broadening our perspective and as techniques and subject matter and whatever. I want to be stretched, and that doesn't mean I'm going to like everything. I didn't particularly like this film tonight, but I found it interesting to hear what others found favorable about it. But I would not want you to shy away from bringing new dimensions to us.
You're very diplomatic. Thank you. No, I won't. But I just, the feedback is important because it helps me do better for us, and believe me, there's so many good films out there. There are some issues. Sometimes I don't need approval for everything. If I speak up strongly enough, I can show anything I want. But, it's all fitting in with the program at Wilshire Boulevard. And Rabbi Nanus has been very collaborative. There will be 2 films shown on the break on the day of Yom Kippur. And this is a tradition that they do. They always show a movie. They have many events at the downtown campus, as well as the Irma's campus on the west side. And now that they have university, she said, let's show a film there as well. So we finally decided on films for that day. I don't want to announce them now, but I didn't push back too hard because they're good films, and that's the first thing. I don't program bad stuff because it's Jewish only. Content is very important, but it has to be well developed and relevant and speak to us and move us and engage us so that we can go deeper in our discussion. All of us can find things to amuse ourselves online and now go back to theaters. You don't need me to entertain you.
Jim, I have a recommendation for this group. It's a film that's in theaters and I believe also online, Lemley Virtual. It's called Summer of '85, and it's Francois Ozon, and it's in French, and it's about it's actually got a Jewish theme. It's 2 gay young men who fall in love. One is Jewish and one is not. And it's about their relationship and really well done.
Oh, thank you. I'll look into it.
The most gorgeous French countryside that you could imagine. And as I said, I saw it at the Royal, but you can also, actually it's gone from the Royal now, but you could see it Lemley Virtual.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else have suggestions?
Jim, are you going to announce the next film, Jim? Because I'm going to have to go in about 2
Okay,
seconds.
I can't announce it yet. Here's why. Next Saturday is Tisha B'Av, which is a holiday, so we're not programming for that.
Okay.
And I will be away until August, so you can talk behind my back all you want, but it doesn't look like we'll have a film until August 14th or 21. And I'm sorry about that, but we're gonna have a lot of really great films. I'm actually saving some for the fall and post holidays. Some big ones that we're gonna have. And we will have Elizabeth Stearns appearing with the father. She's a congregant who's very active in Alzheimer's research and fundraising. And we'll also have the historian, David Sarna, who's a very well-respected Jewish historian, be our guest. He was in a movie we're going to see called Jewish Soldiers in Blue and Gray about Jewish families on either side of the Civil War. Fascinating stuff. Those might be on Wednesday nights, but we'll see. We're still working out what night is a good night for us. Clearly, the Wednesdays did not work out in the summer for us, but this was a good turnout tonight. And I don't want to tell you what I'm looking at because then you'll see it on your own. But everything's chosen and staged in a certain order. I will be showing a film called Shoplifters. It's a Japanese film about an unusual family that isn't related, but it's a new definition for family. Oh, and by the way, tonight's film was nominated for Best Documentary.
Really?
So those of you who liked it, there were others who agreed with you and found something to it. Whether it was the film, the Academy does skew older, and I'm not surprised they liked it, but it was kind of daring. But in terms of documentary, it really achieved a lot, and that's why it was nominated. So that's where we are. We don't have to stay late unless you have anything else you want to talk about. It's so much fun always to do this. I get a lot out of it, and I hope you do too. And we'll move on.
Have a good
Oh, by the
vacation.
way, one more question. Vern, go ahead. No.
No, just have a good vacation.
Okay. Remember, there's a caregiver, some European woman who, this is the 10th, 11th patient she's cared for over 30 years. And I'm not dealing with a life and death situation, but I have caregivers in my house 7 days a week. And it's great. I'm so glad they're there. At the same point, their English isn't as good as hers. And you wonder what kind of a life this, she's really a hospice person without having any credentials. And if you've ever met a person who's a professional hospice caregiver, it's very interesting. A lot of them are religiously based, by the way. And I don't have to continue with the morbidity, but that's another way that it touched me. And it's very real that this woman would have insights like that. And just like the Black man who moved the books and the bookshelves from his office in Seattle, he had a way of freeing people up so they could speak their mind. You know, they got this Black guy to talk about his father drowning. And it was wonderful that this is a gift, you know, a human gift that these people have. Okay, Fern, last word to you.
Nope, just
Nope.
everybody have a good break and we will reconvene
In 3 or 4 weeks. Sorry that it's
several
4.
weeks.
Thank you, Jim. Everything was
Thank you,
great.
Jim.
Great.
Jim, you have a good
Thank you, Doris.
vacation.
Oh, I want the record to show that my dog's cuter than Fern's dog.
Ah, Jay, you don't know what you're talking about.
No, I like Diane's dog. What
Diane's
kind of
dog,
is
okay,
that,
too.
Diane.
Let's have a straw poll.
On the dogs.
Okay, caution.
Okay, bye,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you for a great
everyone.
discussion. Take
We
care.
love our dogs. Yes, we love our dogs.